And good morning, everyone. Welcome to another edition of After Further Review. I'm Dave DeNatale alongside my man Jay Crawford. Is for the first time since the Bill Clinton presidential administration, for the first time since Bill Belichick was the head coach here, your Cleveland Browns are 4-1 after a 32-23 win over the Indianapolis Colts on Sunday. I mean, Jay, it's been a long time coming. Going back to 1994, and like those teams, even back in '94, it's not pretty always, but somehow they find a way to get it done, and that's what the Browns did once again.
That's what good teams do. They win games that are close and hang in the balance late. And that's what the Browns have done through the first 5 games. It's interesting. You mentioned 1994. So look at it like this. If you're a Browns fan and you're under 30 years old, you don't know what this feels like. This is the first time that you remember a team that you root for in the Cleveland Browns being off to a 4-1 start. That's frightening because fan bases maintain themselves by making sure that the talent cycle keeps them in relevancy every 5 to 10 years. Because when young kids are growing up, especially in today's age, it's too easy to root for the Lakers in the NBA or the Patriots in the NFL because you can see everything and you're no longer just seeing one team. When we were growing up, you just had access to your local team. You would see the Monday night game, but other than that, the team that you had to watch was your local team. So these fans were almost, held hostage. You had to root for your local team. But that hasn't been the case the last 15 years. And it scares me because I see a lot of young kids in the Cleveland area wearing Patriots garb or Steelers garb. And why not? If you're going to pick who you want to be associated with, you're going to pick a winner. And so hopefully this sort of thing can continue for the next decade where we can sort of rebuild that fan base and make sure it doesn't extinguish on itself, because it's really hard to find the diehard young Browns fans like there were when I was a kid. They were everywhere around me. And so 4-1's very nice. I was mentioning earlier that the cool nugget about that is the last time the Browns managed to get to a 4-1 record, they had 2 men on their staff in head coach Bill Belichick and defensive coordinator Nick Saban that would later go on to become arguably the greatest coaches in their respective leagues. Belichick with 6 Super Bowls is certainly in the Mount Rushmore of great NFL head coaches. And just by virtue of winning 6, if you're counting rings, he's the best. And you can flip that to Nick Saban in the NCAA ranks, arguably the greatest coach college football has ever seen. He's won 6 national championships, 1 with LSU, 5 with Alabama, at a time where it's not easy to continue to stay on top with that rotating talent base that the NCAA has to deal with. So this time the Browns get to 4-1 with a little old rookie coach named Kevin Stefanski, who, aside from getting very predictable and conservative once he gets a big lead, I think has hit every single right note.
Yeah, and I wonder, and people talked about this on social media, this is essentially the same roster that the Browns had last year in what turned out to be a miserable season. I mean, most of your, whether you're talking about, Landry and Mayfield and Garrett and Odell Beckham, it's the same roster. Stefanski is getting way more than Freddie Kitchens ever did. So you sit there and say, well, it's coaching, but what specifically, is he doing that you are noticing that we haven't seen the last few coaches be able to get out of a team like this?
Well, the key word is culture. You always hear head coaches talk about it. Every coach that's been hired here in Cleveland over the last 25 years, they come in and they preach culture and they preach that it has to change. But you can't talk a culture change into existence. You have to coach it into existence. And I think that's what we've seen from Kevin Stefanski. One of the things I like to point to is penalties. I think that is what measures a team's discipline. And I mentioned this in my column for Channel 3 this morning. I'm going to try to remember the numbers off the top of my head. I think they're somewhere in the ballpark of 49 through 5 games last year and 26 through 5 games this year. Something like that. It might be 46 to 29. Either way, we're committing at least 3 or 4 penalties less a game. Well, that's 40 yards that you're gifting the opponent that you're no longer giving them. It's extending drives on stupid penalties on third down. Right. It's killing drives with a holding call on first down. When you're 1st and 20, get your punter ready. And so one of the big things that I've seen is discipline. And I think the other thing, Dino, and in fairness to Freddie Kitchens and the staff, they were hampered with losing Myles Garrett for much of the season, and he's clearly been the defensive MVP of this football team. Some could argue he's the overall MVP of the football team right now. He's single-handedly changed the trajectory of games. When he got that safety or forced that safety from Phillip Rivers yesterday, I said at the time, that might be the play of the game because it's now a 2-score game. And the way the game played out, likely the Colts don't kick that field goal late. They go for it because now it's 27-20 and a touchdown ties it. And if you don't get it, a stop and a touchdown, you still have another chance. So, I just think that he's doing more with the same roster. His offensive philosophy, I think, has been spot on, with the exception of, like I mentioned, I think that, really the last 2 games followed a very, very similar trajectory. The Browns used defensive stops and turnovers and a potent offensive attack to score on all of their first half possessions. And then the offense just went into hibernation. It happened against Dallas, and they almost erased that huge lead. And it really happened yesterday against the Colts. And it's happening because, in part, we're shrinking the playbook once the game gets to that point. Once the game gets to a double-digit lead, we're seeing Stefanski sort of, get conservative, and that's no way to play. Watch Andy Reid when it's 17-3. Now, I know they blew a 17-3 lead yesterday, but they lost it because the team they were playing with head coach John Gruden, John would ask for a hit on 20 in a game of blackjack. He's a gambler. And he knew that if you're going to beat the Chiefs, you're going to throw it at them and you're going to throw it deep. And that's exactly what they did. They forced a huge pick six. And so Andy Reid's club lost yesterday. But the pattern of his career has been, when you have them on the floor, you put your foot on their throat and you try to choke them out. And I think, the last 2 games, we've seen a real switch to a conservative play call. And we saw 2 different teams because of it. We saw a team have to kind of fight and scratch and claw to hold on to a win.
I want to get a couple of things off of that. First, the Myles Garrett thing. I agree. I think he's right now, the defensive NFL player of the year. I mean, through 5 games. I don't think there's any question. I mean, he has literally changed the course of games because of his play. And I mean, he when you draft a guy first overall, you want him to be an impact player. And, Myles had shown glimpses of that and making plays. But I mean, Jay, what he's doing right now is pretty staggering. I mean, he is absolutely changing games for the Browns.
He is. Aaron Donald is also having a monster year again. So I think he would certainly have to be in that conversation. But I'll tell you, what we've seen in Myles Garrett is he has this knack, and he did it again yesterday when they had them pinned deep in their own territory. He has this knack to dial it up another gear, which is crazy because he's already playing at a high level and he's already proven that he's a terrific player all of the time. But they needed something big on that play, and he bull rushed Phillip Rivers and forced him to throw the ball where there wasn't a receiver. resulting in a safety. Now, I think in his mind, he was probably thinking, okay, strip sack, fumble recovery, touchdown. And even though it didn't turn out that way, you can see that he imposes his will on opposing offenses in a way that the Browns haven't seen in a very long time. I don't want to say they've never seen this kind of impactful defensive player, because we've had some great defensive players in the past. But Dino, run through your memory bank and try to find a defensive player in the Browns' history that has been as disruptive and can have the kind of impact on a game that Myles Garrett has had in his very brief career. He just passed yesterday Von Miller with 36 and a half sacks in his first 42 games. Now let that sink in. That's nearly, Dino, a sack a game. Von Miller is definitely destined for the Hall of Fame.
Yep.
Myles Garrett is off to a better 42-game start than Von Miller, and that's impressive. There's only 4 players in the history of the game, and they're all Hall of Famers, who started their careers with more sacks than Myles Garrett has through 42. And he's far from finished. He's still a work in progress. And if you want to know why we're 4-1, it's pretty simple. The offense has clicked, no question. But I think the single biggest reason we're 4-1 is because of the turnover differential.
Yeah.
And Myles Garrett has his fingerprints all over that, whether it's forced fumbles or whether it's interceptions that were hurried because the quarterback felt the heat of Myles Garrett. We're plus 12 right now in turnover differential, plus 12. I know you can't rely on that, and sometimes that can be fool's gold, because if you live that way, you can die that way if all of a sudden you're not forcing turnovers.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that we're plus 6 in turnover differential, that leads the NFL. We have 12 takeaways.
Takeaways, yes.
And that also leads the NFL. So while both stats are great, they're a little bit of fool's gold. And you're not always going to get them. You have to prove that you can beat teams without getting turnovers. And yesterday, we gave it up twice on throws we shouldn't have given the ball up on. And I was starting to think that maybe we're washing that part of our game out. But it could have been 4 interceptions. There was one that was absolutely in the hands of the defender, and he dropped it. And there was another one late in the game that would have been critical. That was thrown right at the defender. It would have taken a great catch, but it could have been 3 or 4 interceptions. Until we wash those out, they're going to come back to bite us, especially when you play a team like Baltimore or Pittsburgh.
Right. And I thought, for the most part, the first half yesterday, when the Browns weren't really able to get the running game cranked up, Baker played tremendous. I thought he was great. I thought he spread the ball around, got everybody involved.
He looked like a Pro Bowl quarterback.
And then all of a sudden, after the Colts get the kick return for a touchdown, the Browns get the ball back, look like they're about to, start moving the ball. And Baker throws to a spot where he can't throw it. He's been in the league long enough to know he can't throw it. He could have dumped it off to Dearness Johnson. He could have found a button hook to OBJ. I think even Higgins might have been open. Trying to force it down the seam like that. I just go, Baker, I thought we were done with this. And, it's old habits are hard to break.
They are. It's concerning. Here's the good news. We know he can be that guy. We saw it in the first half. We saw it in the first half against Dallas, even though they didn't have to throw the ball around yesterday. What was interesting, against Dallas, what was interesting to me yesterday was it proved the diversity of our offense. So we go to Dallas and we crank up 307 yards. It's an all-time record against any Cowboys team ever. The Colts come in, the number 1 rated defense against the run. They worked all week, clearly, on taking the run game away. Now, granted, it's easier to do when there's no Chubb.
Right.
But they built their game plan around Cleveland not running the ball. And I initially thought, when I saw the first couple plays, I'm like, okay, this isn't going to be Dallas. They're not going to give us big runs. They're just not going to do it. They're a much different defense. For starters, they know how to tackle. So I said, now it's almost shifted to Baker. Can Baker put the game on his shoulders when the opposing defense is putting 8 and 9 in the box saying you're not going to run it? And through 2 quarters of the game, he did just that. He made a couple of huge third down conversions, critical throws. The throw to Jarvis Landry was incredible. And granted, Landry and Beckham made some all-world catches, but Baker's passes had zip. They had intention. And the other thing that we've talked about continually on here, I don't have the exact numbers. I'm just using my eye test, Dino. When he either rolls out or they have motion to get him off the spot, Baker's one guy. When they drop him straight back, he's another guy. And I like the on the move Baker a whole lot more. Every time he sprinted out to move the pocket, he stood there with plenty of time. And he had time to look for his receivers and make his throws. And here's the other thing, and this is a real thing. I've talked to so many quarterbacks about this. I remember Drew Brees telling me right around the time they won the Super Bowl that he was able to be successful in the league once he figured out he couldn't stand between the tackles and look downfield because he wasn't big enough to do that. Russell Wilson has consistently said the same thing. Coach, you got to get me off my spot. When I drop straight back, I can't see.
Right.
Baker's the same guy. He's the same height. He's the same general player. If you move him out and get him so he's not standing in front of that 6'7" wall, he can see downfield and he's less likely to make those throws. He made a throw. One of his picks yesterday was like, who was he throwing to? He didn't see the defender because he couldn't see the defender. Right. So don't drop him straight back. He's a sitting duck. Move him out left or right, either with boots or rolls or whatever you have to do. But he is a far more efficient passer when he's not standing between the tackles on a 5 or 7 step drop.
He sees the field so much better. I mean, it's unbelievable. He just absolutely, he sees the field. His vision is better. I couldn't agree more. So the Browns are 4-1. Next up, they've got the Steelers. Yeah. And, we've seen a lot of times, Jay, not to this extent with a 4-1 start, but Browns teams that, you sit there and say, well, they may have something here. And they go into Pittsburgh and crash. It just all kind of falls apart. They not only lose the game, but it becomes that the old Chris Palmer runaway train thing. Right. This is big. I mean, you want the Browns to go out and win because you got to be able to prove you can win in the division, and you want to be able to prove you can win some road games. But I just think you got to show the bully that you can take their best hit and come back and overcome it.
You do. I've got a lot of fear about what's going to happen Sunday, just because I know the Steelers' history. Their pass rush is ferocious. They just get after quarterbacks, particularly when they need to. We saw that yesterday in their win over the Eagles. The game was in the balance and Pittsburgh needed to stop. And all of a sudden, it's like there's a switch that their defensive coordinator has, and they flip it. And then pressure's coming from all sides, and it's a suffocating pocket, and it's a wrap. It's going to be more important than ever for Baker that he is on the move, because if you just drop straight back and let them come at you from both sides and up the middle, I don't think it's going to be a good ending. If you move him and with rolls and boots and you get him either right or left, particularly when he rolled left a couple times, the flow was going right. He rolled left. He had his choice of guys, and there was no one in front of him. It's a clear, unabated throw. That's what they're going to have to do against Pittsburgh. And we know they can do it. I've seen it in their playbook, and I know that Baker can pull that kind of play off. It's going to be another game like Dallas. It's going to be a high-scoring game, and it's just going to be a matter of can our defense hold them to under 30 points. I think our offense can score 30 points. Yeah. Yesterday, again, just like Dallas, our drive chart in the first half was perfect. We had 4 drives. we had 4 scores. In Dallas, in the first half, 5 scores. And in the second half, it looked just like the Dallas game. 3 and out, 8 and out, 5 and out. They scored 9 second half points before the field goal that clinched it. And the field goal was set up really by the defense.
Right.
But they get a pick 6. They get the forced safety. Then they get another interception, which set up the 3 points. So the offense scored 3 points in the second half. You do that against Pittsburgh or Baltimore, and you're walking out of there with an L. You have to put 4 good quarters of football together. That's why I'm hoping that the offensive game plan and Stefanski starts calling the game like they're down 10 from the very first play.
Yeah.
And even if they're up 23 late in the game, call it like you're down 10. This offense has proven that when you're playing like that, they can score points. We've proven when we get conservative results. We don't score. So keep your foot on the gas. Take it to Pittsburgh. And if we're lucky enough to pour it on them, then do it.
Right.
But don't play to keep it close and make it interesting at the end of the game, because they did get wins against Dallas and Indianapolis. But even yesterday, if you're a Browns fan, you're doing the mental math when it's 29-20 going, a touchdown and a kick beats us.
Right.
And then they get the kick, and then we, go 3 and out predictably on offense. And then, Indy gets the ball back, and thankfully we had the turnover. But, you're not going to live on that every week. So you've got to continue to, push when you're up 10 or down 10. You play the same kind of football.
Jade, wrapping up, I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up, it is a sunny day out there.
It's unreal. Dino, the sun is coming up over my roof line, and I have to keep moving because no matter where I sit, I'm just pounded with sun. So
absolutely,
I apologize.
No, it's okay.
Listen,
it's okay.
In a couple of weeks, I'll be forced indoors for these, and that's really interesting. So I'm trying to, as long as it's not snowing and 30 degrees, I'm gonna try to come out here.
That's right. You're a trooper, my friend. Hey, I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up a sad note in sports this morning. Your former ESPN colleague, the Major League Baseball Hall of Famer Joe Morgan, passed away at the age of 77.
I just saw that.
Yeah. And for those of a certain age, I only got to really see him at the end of his career. I obviously knew him as the great broadcaster working with John Miller on Sunday Night Baseball on ESPN, and with Bob Costas and Bob Uecker on the Baseball Network and here on NBC. But he was the heart and soul of the Big Red Machine and those great Cincinnati teams in the 70s. And it's been a tough year for Baseball Hall of Fame legends. We've lost Seaver and Gibson and Brock, Whitey Ford now. Yeah. And now Joe Morgan. I just wanted to give you a moment here because I know, as a fan and as a colleague, Joe meant something.
I'll start as the fan in me. So anybody over 50 will remember this. If you're under 50, you'll have to trust me or YouTube it. But he had the twitch. Do you remember that? If you saw him play, you remember it. He would twitch his back elbow as the pitcher was getting set and looking for the sign. Of course, when you're a kid and you emulate the players that you see that are successful, you try everything. I remember in a Little League game, I was a righty, and I remember coming up and doing this right here. And the manager on the other team said, "Careful, guys, Joe Morgan's at the plate." I never did it again. That was the last time I ever did it. and we had a nice laugh after the game about it. But he was a fierce competitor. He proved later in life, as a second baseman, it's really hard to prove your baseball acumen and your IQ because you're only involved in double play turns, and you're never really strategizing like you are as a pitcher or a catcher. But once he went into the broadcast booth and we got to know him as Joe Morgan, the color man, we realized just how much he knew about the game, and he revered the rules of the game and the tradition of the game. You mentioned that we were colleagues at ESPN together. I had many opportunities to meet and spend time with Joe. I never wasted an opportunity when I was with him to talk about those Big Ten or those Big Red Machine years. and what they meant to him. I always wanted to know the intricacies of the relationships between Pete Rose and Johnny Bench. You know, Joe was always a diplomat and never gave me what I was looking for, but I could just get enough from his storytelling that I could sort of fill in the blanks and sort of connect some of the dots. But that being said, I had a great reverence for Joe as a colleague and as a baseball analyst. The game is going to miss him for sure. And you said it. He really was a big part of that big red machine. And my heart goes out to his family and all Reds fans who I know are mourning the loss of an all-time great. He was one of a kind.
Absolutely. Absolutely. My friend, as always, I appreciate your time here on After Further Review. We will see you coming up at 5:00 today on What's New, and look forward to seeing you and Betsy in action and having a great show today.
It's another Victory Monday. I can get used to this. Okay.
Me too.
I can get used to this. Dino, thanks, man. We'll see you soon.
All right. Thanks everybody for watching. For Jay Crawford, I'm Dave DeNatale. This has been After Further Review.